black royalty of Vallejo, the pioneers that made Vallejo what it was, you have to bring up the Lofas sets. You got to bring up Lofas. Much love to Lofas-Lakeside Manor, but we all call it Lofas. Shout out to all y'all out there, Lofas Mob, the NFL. I don't even know if they still do NFL. Some of y'all know what I meant when I said that. Be you from Pep, be you from Walnut. Some of the most influential people, not only in Vallejo, but in the Bay Area, came out of that neighborhood. Whether we talking about the Mac, not Mac Dre, because I know a lot of y'all was like, no, Mac Dre from the Crest. No, we ain't talking about them. Those of y'all who from Vallejo, you know what the fuck I'm talking about. Goddamn, the game is thick. Yes, sir. Michael Robinson, rest in peace to him. My condolences to his family, etc., etc. We talking about the Mac. Goddamn Edward Lopez, who was the first physician with some Negro blood in him to be allowed to do his medical practice as a physician at the Vallejo General Hospital in the city of Vallejo. Yes, we got to bring him up. You got to bring up Confunction. Yes, Confunction. That goddamn group that made that fucking Love Train song that all of our uncles get drunk to and sing every family reunion. Yes, that was them. You got to bring up them. You got to bring up Jesse Bethel. Those of y'all from Vallejo, I went to 6 months of Vallejo. I went to 6 months of Jesse Bethel before I got my GED. Like, yeah, you got to bring them. His family there, Jesse and Claudia. Now pause. I want to do a full deep dive on how do we get to Lofas. How does this even become a haven, a place where blacks could come buy homes at? So, let's go back to the 1940s. Let's go back to the 1930s in the V-Town. At that time, Vallejo, I've always taken pride in the fact that Vallejo, I used to live in Vallejo, has always had a very, very, very diverse population. Even back then, you had a lot of Filipinos, you had a lot of whites, you had a lot of blacks. And there was some racial skirmishes, which we'll get to later, but there was a little bit of a harmony on certain aspects, but on certain aspects, no. Like, for example, the housing thing. When blacks first started coming to Vallejo, we initially started coming there in the 30s and 40s, and maybe not actually 30s and 40s. 40s heavily because of World War II. And I've talked about this in prior videos too, where there was a lot of defense housing made in Vallejo, in North Richmond, or even in Hayward, to house the blacks and house a lot of people who were coming there from the South, because we had a lot of production. We had a lot of mass production for all of these ships, all these shipyards and rail yards that we needed to, because we was in World War. So this is when you get into the conversation talking about Chabot terrorists, Floyd terrorists. There was a whole thing of a bunch of housing projects built in the city of Vallejo that were basically housing projects for a lot of African Americans to stay in, who were there to work in these production companies or work in these shipyards because we were in the middle of World War. Okay, cool. Here's the problem. And this is also going to get to the crest too. So when World War II ended, all of those, for the most part, the majority of those housing projects shut down. Floyd Terrace, Chabot Terrace, they shut down. And a lot of blacks were left without places to go. Or they could go to some places, but only if they were in the ghetto. And a lot of the times, if they would try to move to a whiter neighborhood with the whoop, damn sure not the East, they couldn't fuck with the East at all back in the day, you would not get approved for a home loan because, you guessed it, your ass was black. This is where we get to B.W. Williams, and much respect to him, and my condolences to his passing. He passed in 2001. B.W. Williams is one of the most influential pioneers, I'll say, in African-American just architecture, real estate, etc., etc. This is a man who grew up, his father's was grandfather. They had roots in construction and carpentry coming from Texas. They moved from Texas to Phoenix. When he got to Phoenix, him and his brother-in-law started a company called the Williams and Jones Construction Company, with some success there, building homes and doing home remodels there, particularly for African-Americans. At his company's request, he ended up going from there to Pittsburgh, California, because there was a large black population there. And at this time, this was in the 40s, this is when all of them goddamn housing projects, not just in Vallejo, but in Pittsburgh and Hayward and in North Richmond, were getting torn down. So a lot of blacks were genuinely left without homes to go, or even just lower middle class, just proper housing, right? So when he went there, he started doing that too. Word got back to him that in Vallejo, a lot of African Americans are having the same struggle as well too. So he goes to Vallejo. There was a struggle, a lack of housing available for African Americans. You know, a lot of them African Americans like, bro, we can't get homes here. Well, we do want to get homes. They want to push us in the fucking like slum. Like, what are we supposed to do? There was a man called Gus Lofas, white man named Gus Lofas, who had a pretty sizable portion of land just west of Lake Chabot in Vallejo in the north. So when you go there, him and this man had a conversation, and they had an agreement to sell the land to him, allowed him to build a 50-home tract, which was later expanded on there, as long as you named the neighborhood after him. This is where we get to Lofas-Lakeside Manor. And even today, The Food Basket store in the Lofas neighborhood, that is actually, I don't know if that's still owned by Gus and Gene. I know Gus and Gene, Gus Lofas and, no, sorry, Pete Lofas and Gene Lofas. I know they owned it up until, I want to say the 90s, to be honest with you. I don't know if they still own it now, but they owned it there. The Lofas family was actually very influential in the community. That first 50 home tract that they built there was a success, which led them to building more homes, et cetera, et cetera. This turned into a basically thriving African American community. There was crime there. I ain't gonna hold you. As time goes by, Vallejo went through this phase in the 80s where crime just hit us really hard. There was a flood that took place in the 80s. Some of y'all remember that flood that happened, I want to say in 1981, 1982. Regardless of what changes they went through, be it good, be it bad, the reason why I thought I wanted to talk about this is because, and I feel like I'm kind of skirting over the negative effects that hit it, but reality is the crack epidemic hit Vallejo hard. It just did. I ain't gonna hold you. It just did. Like, it hit the Crest hard. It hit Lofas hard. I want to do a really big deep dive into why a lot of lower middle class to upper working class black neighborhoods kind of fall, but I feel like that should be a whole video outside of itself. The reason why I wanted to talk about this neighborhood was because this neighborhood was formed with all the good intentions in the world. And a lot of people don't know, bro, a lot of blacks still own homes in that neighborhood. Like, that's a lot of people just look at Vallejo and think it's ghetto, but bro, a lot of blacks, even those ghettos, still own homes. The reason why the home ownership is so important to me is because we live in a state right now where living in the ghetto is expensive. If you want to buy a home in the ghetto, it's expensive. If you want to buy a home in the worst part of North Stockton, the worst part of East Oakland, West Oakland, you're going to have to drop a dime. So home ownership is expensive. Home ownership is really important to me. I respect not only Lofas, but as well as B.W. Williams, because to me, this was an example of blacks saying, hey, we're going to create a solution to a problem. We're going to take our money. We're going to try to do what we got to do. We're going to go to negotiations. And even the relationship in between the Lofas family and the neighborhood was deep for me because, you know, reality is most of us stay in neighborhoods where, like, when I stayed in neighborhood too, none of us, we don't have a relationship with the white man who's named after the neighborhood. That's a very rare thing. But I appreciate that. Don't get me wrong, Vallejo had his fuck ups. Vallejo had his racist moments, and we'll talk about that in other videos that I'll be on this Patreon. But one of the things I've always appreciated about Vallejo is the diversity, the unity. I wish people understood how rare it is to have such a just union of just friendliness amongst all of our people there. And I love the V. And like I told you, I went to 6 months at Jesse Bethel High School. I knew for sure Jesse and Claudia Bethel, they both lived in Lofas. Jesse was actually the first black man to sit on the Vallejo school board. Like, he was like, bro, like it's. I hope that y'all watch this video, and when you talk about black history in California, bro, you gotta bring up Vallejo, bro. I wish people put more respect on Vallejo's name. Even in my last video, I was talking about the history of Filipinos in Vallejo. I wish people would put more respect on Vallejo's name when it came to that. Like, it was very progressive. It was very ahead of its time with certain things. And I don't know, much love to the V, much love to Lofas. Thank y'all for tuning into this Patreon episode. I'm gonna see you guys soon.